Chris and Chris Talk Business.
Hello, welcome to Chris and Chris Talk Business. I'm Chris.
And I'm Chris.
No, I was Chris first.
You were Chris first. You're going to play that card all the time.
That's right. It's the only card I've got. Anyway, today we're going to talk about business.
I love business.
Yeah. So I'm going to kick it over to you because last time it was kind of all about you.
It was all about me, but now I'm going to make it about me, but I'm going to let it be about you.
Yeah, you're going to bring me into the me.
Yeah.
You're the big me.
And yeah, you're the big me, and you're kind of the future me.
Oh, the future me.
I think you are.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll ever be a pastor, but I met you as a pastor.
Yeah.
And I want to know what you have to say about business. And I think other people are going to be curious, why are you talking about business? Being this great theologian, pastor.
Yeah. I got you all fooled.
Yeah, you got me fooled. But that's easy to do. And so what I do, only thing I do know is about real estate in your past your past in real estate and your current in real estate. But what brought you to this conversation of business and entrepreneurship, Wiley?
Yeah, well, there are actually kind of two threads. One is that if you're trying to sort of locate what a pastor does in sort of a larger scheme of things, you can actually say that, this is my conviction, that what a pastor does mostly resembles a small businessman.
What?
It's true. It's true. So, for example, you've got income statements, you've got people, you've got to think about income and expenses and those kinds of things. But you're also trying to grow an organization. You're
Sure.
thinking about that.
Yeah.
And there are, things that a pastor does that obviously you don't see your typical entrepreneur do. But when I thought about my own sort of work, I never thought about myself as sort of punching a clock.
That's good.
So
Yeah.
I think a lot. Now, that's not to say some guys don't.
Sure.
I do think that some guys who are in the ministry do think of themselves as sort of an employee. I've never thought of myself as an employee. I always thought of myself as somebody who is a professional, but that includes all kinds of different important features. But I think when it came to this particular organization is something that I've been given the responsibility for helping to prosper, but also to enrich the people who are connected to it.
Sure.
And work with people, productively.
Well, I hope all pastors think that.
Well, I'm not sure they do.
Well, I don't want to say that because I'm biting my tongue when you said the first thing you said. I was like, do all pastors know this? But I said it, so I didn't really bite it too hard. But were you a pastor first and then a businessman or an entrepreneur? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been involved in pastoral ministry since the late 80s.
Okay.
So it's going on 40 years that I've been doing this. And when I would work with the churches, so I've served a number of churches. When I would work with the churches, I never would talk to them as though I were an employee. And mostly in terms of what I kind of thought about when I would relate to, say, my church leaders is, what are the outcomes? That's the thing we want to be thinking about. What are the outcomes? Now, you can think about the outcomes in terms of spiritual growth.
Sure.
But you could also think about the outcomes in other ways, in terms of the growth of the church, in different respects, attendance, and, people getting involved in ministry and those kinds of things. And then even in terms of, like, what's coming in. So in all those years, I've only had 1 year in the red in terms of my pastoral work.
Oh, good job.
So that 1 year was what year?
I'm going to say the .coms, the 2000s.
It was the subprime mortgage crash.
Oh,
2008.
So 2008. That was my second guess, but
Yeah.
it's pretty close. It would be one of those.
Yeah,
But
it was the second one. And here's what I did. So I really blew them away when I did this. So we looked at the numbers at the end of the year, and we had a shortfall, about $20,000. And I said, I'm going to take a $20,000 pay cut.
How big? What was your annual tithing or revenue? I'm going to say revenue. It's not probably what
We were in the church. Yeah, I think we were like, it was a smallish church. We were around maybe 300,000.
Okay, so you're 20 grand short, and you said I'll take a 20 grand pay cut.
Yep. So because what I said is we're gonna budget based on last year's income.
Okay.
We're not going to budget with this sort of wishful thinking. We're budgeting for growth.
Yeah.
So what I did is at that point I built into the culture of the church. We budget after last year's income, and therefore every year we're in the
We should be in the black. Yeah.
We're putting money away
Yeah.
toward hiring people, toward expanding the facilities, all that stuff.
That's good stewardship. I like that.
But the reason I was thinking that is I wasn't thinking like an employee. Like
Yeah.
when you're in business, that's how you think.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm the bottom line.
Yeah.
It's like I got to be the one that goes without.
Yeah. No, I mean, you are without until maybe the end.
Yeah,
If you're
right.
lucky.
That's right. That's right. So one of the reasons I was able to do that is because of real estate.
Sure.
So even at that point, the church wasn't my only source of income.
I love that. This is encouraging because you touched on something. I'm hesitant in saying it, but I was a part of a church that dissolved. And when those pastors went out and started new churches, they didn't have that same mentality. They wanted to start a church with a $75,000 starting salary.
Yeah.
And so, which conflicted with me as an entrepreneur.
Sure.
So it makes sense now.
Yeah, you were thinking I was eating hot dogs.
Yeah, I mean, hot dogs.
For 20 years.
Yeah, like the money, and my expectation for them was the money that you should be asking for is to, if at any, provide coffee, donuts, the electricity, maybe a building. But I think we can get out, we can get by with that bit. So I interrupted, but
No, but
so I love that you said that because you're building and when we met, I'll save that for another day. I'm not ready to talk about that.
You thought
yet.
the worst, didn't you?
I did. In myself.
They always do.
In myself. But you're building my confidence in good godly men that are pastors.
Well, I've known a lot of great guys who over the years made many sacrifices, but I'll say this, it was like the older generation. There was a time where I think that was pretty much kind of the mindset of the old guys.
Yeah.
I don't think the young guys have quite the same mindset. And I'm not talking about my generation as being the old guys. I'm talking about the one that came before me.
Yeah. Yeah. All of our generations we're all different. We're all part of different cultures.
I knew a guy who in his church couldn't afford to pay their missions budget, took out a personal loan and paid it himself. He was a pastor.
Yeah. Well,
When was the last time you heard of a guy doing something like that?
Well, there is a pastor I respect immensely. He doesn't get paid by a church because he runs kind of a tangent organization of the church. So he's not like the lead pastor. So he doesn't get paid. And so he has 3 jobs.
Okay.
One of them is a painting company, which we had him paint our offices, and
Nice.
He didn't charge us enough. I mean, maybe if he charged us, but for him that was like part of his ministry.
Yeah.
And I just got tons of respect for a guy he's called to do that, but he's going to go make his living and then do what he's called to do. And I think some of the younger people, they see it as I'm called to do something. I'm going to obey that calling. Everybody needs to compensate me so I can do this calling.
Yeah.
And maybe that's true, but
when it comes to the scriptural teaching on the matter, the workman is worthy of his hire, as Paul said. But Paul self-funded a lot of the time. So if you read his accounts of his ministry in the New Testament, he'll say to things like, you didn't pay me. I pay for myself. Now, how did he do that?
I'm going to go back and read. Have somebody read to me.
But he did that because he actually had a business on the side. He was a tent maker, which is, when you think about it, is like the ultimate business for a guy on the road, right? And so this is before Marriott's and Hilton's and stuff like that. You're carrying on your back your accommodations.
Now I'm like, did he set up a tent in a town, and then someone was like, hey, that's a nice tent, and he was like, I'll sell you this tent, and then he just moves on to the next one. And he's just
well, here's what I think happened, because he doesn't get into it. We know we know about it because all the time in the New Testament you have these offhanded comments that are like off point, but you're like, I never knew that.
Sure.
Things like and you will judge angels. Everybody knows that. I was like, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that until you just told me.
Yeah, that's right. So, there are these things like that in the New Testament. And one of those things is, these two people that he made friends with were of the same trade, and they're tent makers.
Huh.
And so we know that he was a tent maker. Now, here's the question I have for all of the guys. Did Paul haggle?
100%.
That's exactly right.
He had to haggle. If he didn't, then
my respect would go down.
it's-
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that many Christians, when they think of Paul, they think of a guy that was haggling in the market, not only for the things that he was selling, but for the materials that he would use to make this stuff.
Oh, gosh.
He had to haggle.
I've got stories now, but I can't talk. This is about you. I'm going to make it about me.
But I'm happy to talk about you, but this is fun to think about. So like, I really do think there are a lot of people out there in Christian land
Sure.
who think that there's something morally wrong with haggling.
No.
I agree. There's nothing wrong with haggling.
They need to reach out to me, and I'll get a 90-minute coffee with you, and we can talk about this, and you'll go away learning how to haggle, make your lives better. And also the people that you're haggling with, their life is going to get better.
Well, and often when you're actually haggling with a haggler, they enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's not like it's kind of like we're having some fun here.
Well, now I got a haggle story. Can I?
Yeah, go for it.
So one of the things I love when I get to work with team members is teaching. And the only way I know how to teach is to tell them to go do it, because that's the best way that I learned. And so we gotta drill these in these buildings we're in, running cables up and down. We got to core drill these concrete holes. And I'm like, we're not drilling these holes because we're going to break something. And I can't afford to buy a $20 million building. So we find a company to drill these holes, and Alex, this awesome team member we had, comes back and he's like, I got the quote. It's $5,500. And I'm thinking, that's too much. And everybody, Chris, you got to pay this. You're just being cheap, Alex, it's too much money. He's like, well, what do you want me to tell him? How much can we pay? I go, tell him it's too much.
See what he does.
Come back to me. So Alex goes back, and he comes running back in the office, and he goes, $2,500. They took off half the money. $2,500. And so what do you think I told him then?
Go back and ask.
Yeah, that's exactly. He goes, okay, we're going to do it. It's $2,500. Let's do it. I go back and tell him it's too much money. And, well, the end of the story is this company would come out and do core drills for $500 a hole at the end of this.
Yeah.
But what was good for them, they drilled all our holes.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
they weren't trying to make when they did that original code, it was $5,500 for just one invoice.
One off.
One off.
Yeah.
Now they're drilling all these holes for us at $500 a pop.
Yeah.
It's good for everybody.
Right.
So we wouldn't have got there. They wouldn't have got the recurring business if they would have charged us $5,500, because we would have found someone else next time around. Right. And so haggling was good.
Yeah. So I've got all kinds of haggling stories, not just my own, but others. But if we use them all up right now,
we won't talk about. I still want to know how the pastor and the entrepreneur are the same person.
Well, because what you're doing is you could say, so let's put it in the language of the entrepreneur. So you're seeing something that isn't there, and you're creating value.
Yes.
So there's a parallel there. And I think if more guys in the ministry thought in those terms, it would be really helpful. Because today, I think most guys think of themselves as employed by the church, and they really shouldn't think in those terms. They should say, I'm called by God, and I do have some needs,
sure,
and that kind of stuff. And so, what you give me is really appreciated. Don't get me wrong, but this isn't really about that. You're not paying me. I mean, so let's put it this way. So like historically, the word professional is an interesting word to dig into, because most people, when you ask them what defines a professional, and they would say that somebody gets paid for what they do.
Sure.
Like when you think about sports, professional athletes, somebody gets paid for playing a sport. But the word, if you look at the word, it's an interesting word, professional. So it means professing.
What the?
Yeah, pretty weird, isn't it? So it means professing. So it means saying something. It means saying something. So before we use the word the way we do today, it just meant there are certain occupations that we rely on as a community, and the people who are in those professions have been entrusted with some important knowledge and they speak. So the three professions. So ministry was one of them. Can you think of the other two that were considered the classic professions?
Lawyers and doctors.
That's it.
Yeah.
Those were the three.
Really?
That's it.
Holy crap! I look like a genius.
But that's it. So,
Thank you.
but what happened was when say the mercantile class, the burghers and all these, so like the changes that happened in the late Middle Ages, where you had, wealthy people who were actually funding everybody else.
Yeah.
They said, we want in the action, we want to be called professionals too.
Yeah,
so that's how
that
it
makes
happened.
sense.
That's how it happened. So, but if you go back to the original way of thinking, you say, so an honorarium was the way, so you're paid not because, so you think about it, like what's eternal salvation worth? Like when you say you drilled, holes,
Sure.
It's worth $500. It's priceless. So we can't actually justice like a lawyer. It's priceless.
Sure.
Health, it's priceless. So we can't really put like a dollar figure on it. We want you to live honorably, though. In other words, we really value you. We think what you do is really important for our community, and so we're giving you an honorarium.
Okay.
To honor you. Now, we don't think in those terms today, and definitely when you go to the IRS, they don't think in those terms.
No.
They basically treat a pastor. Well, we do get some very kind of interesting perks based on the long history of the pastorate and ministry and clerical work. So a pastor's tax. So his tax return looks very different than everybody else's.
I might need to look into this, but I don't think anybody's ever going to hire me as a pastor, which is kind of my next. So, what you're talking about seems highly entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
But if you took most entrepreneurs and you put them in a pastoral setting, everybody would leave.
Well, not really.
I feel like
no. I actually think that entrepreneurs make some of the best pastors I've known. So let me give you an example. One of my mentors, a guy that I was with 10 years, his name was John Bowen. He started a high tech firm, sold it to, I think it was either Equifax or TransUnion. I can't remember one of the big ones.
They're basically the same though.
Yes, and today, yeah, for sure.
And what was his business?
I can't remember. It was some kind of data crunching thing.
Okay.
Anyway, they had gotten their venture capital from Sears back in the day, when Sears was like actually making money. And
they were okay.
So he started this company. It did real well. It was bought, and he becomes part of the Fortune 500 world. And so he's like a senior something. And he's got this great story. So like when he was brought into this, they sent him the company manual. And he just threw it away.
Sure.
And so then, like one of the top guys at the firm that he was at came and visited him and said, "What did you think about the manual?" And he looked at the trash can, and there it was.
Sure.
And the guy looked at him and started laughing. And he said, "I've wanted to do that for years." And so he said, "I've got a job for you, John. You're going to be a guy that I use to like deal with problems."
Yeah.
So you're like my problem guy.
Yeah.
So he used John that way for years. And then John left the company and went into the pastorate and became my mentor. And he's kind of legendary. Anybody that knows him is, and the church that we were both at, because John was such a kind of a high caliber guy, he attracted high caliber people.
Sure.
So the church ended up in a very short time, and this was an inner city church in the middle of Cambridge, Massachusetts, was just packed with high caliber, like winners on the staff, but in the congregation and all that kind of stuff. And it was just a lot of fun, during those years to be involved with all that.
That makes sense because they're going to relate with him differently.
Yeah.
So I'm forming these questions now that I'm listening. I'm believing what you're saying. I'm wondering, do you have to be an entrepreneur to be a pastor?
Well, it depends on what kind of pastor you want to be. So, you could say that maybe...
I didn't know there were different kinds.
Well, I would say there are. So I would say that there are some guys who are really employees, and they'll never be anything but an employee. And, they can do good, reliable work. They'll preach, counsel, those kinds of things. But they're never going to color outside the lines.
Okay.
They're definitely company men. Like their idea of advancement is just getting a bigger church.
Sure.
Moving on from church to church, and they just get a bigger church. And some of those guys do that, and I'm not against them or anything like that.
No, I think that they provide. They're needed.
Yep, they're needed. And then there are guys that have a more entrepreneurial spirit, and some of those guys go into church planting. Not all the guys who go into church planting have that.
Yeah.
Or maybe they've got kind of a missions kind of mindset, so it kind of carries over into like, getting into a new part of the world and kind of starting something from scratch, that kind of thing. But guys who are entrepreneurial in the ministry, generally speaking, are not. They make people around them uncomfortable in the hierarchies of their denominations.
Good.
They really do.
Yeah.
I can't think of a single instance where you had a real sort of pastoral entrepreneur who didn't like get everybody worried.
Yeah, that's what we do. Yeah, as soon as all the goals are met and we achieve what we're trying to do,
right?
We got something else that's crazy we're going to do.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I got a story. So going back to John. So John sold the airspace over the Lambs Club in Times Square in Manhattan.
Yeah, I want to hear more about
for $100 million.
Yeah.
So, and that's part of his legend.
Okay.
But anyway, I knew him through that whole process. And in fact, my oldest son is over there. We would go to his house in Manhattan. He lived on Roosevelt Island, which is, if you're going to live in Manhattan, you want to live in Roosevelt Island because the East River is like a moat.
Okay.
It kind of keeps all the crazies away.
Yeah.
Anyway, but you're right there, just like a couple of subway stops away from like everything. But anyway, so we would go there and I would hang out with him, and I enjoyed being with him during those years. But he went through all kinds of crazy stuff to get that deal done. But then after the deal was done, and he had set up this foundation to fund church planting in Manhattan, people were still freaked out by him. I mean, he just set up a $100 million foundation to help fund church planting, and people were worried about him. And I remember my last kind of dinner with him. We were there in the middle of Manhattan, and we went to this kind of greasy spoon place for lunch. And he's the sort of guy I wouldn't go to like chain restaurants. It was either a greasy spoon or a 5-star restaurant.
Yeah, I like that.
That kind of thing. So we're sitting at this. He says, "I got this thing I want to show you." So he pulls out this tube, and he's like 70 years old at this point. He's all excited about his next big project. And he pulls out this tube and he opens it up, and it's blueprints for a 14-story building in Harlem that he's setting up as kind of what was the place where you'd lease workspace for like startups and stuff? There was a company.
Like WeWork?
Yeah, WeWork.
Yeah.
It was like WeWork for Christians, but it was like WeWork for ministries. So he set up this thing that was going to be this, pretty significant thing. And he got destroyed by the bureaucrats in that denomination. Sure. And they literally just fired him and just said, "We never want to see you again."
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, at the time, what year was this?
This would have been like maybe 2014, something like that.
Yeah, so shared workspace was...
I don't think that it was the work model that was freaking him out. I just think it was just like big thinking that freaked him out.
Yeah. Well, there's always humans. I told you this last night. When I sold my company, I think my dad, and I think this is most people, they don't think that is the norm outcome of when you pursue something to make something greater. They just think you got lucky. So then now play it easy. So this church is like, we did this thing. Why are we risking?
Yeah.
Why are we putting things at risk?
Right.
And I think that they're asking the wrong questions.
I agree. But I think you're right. It's very hard for people who are kind of, corporate types to accept they're missing out on anything. In other words, it must be just a scam. It must be they're cheating somehow. This isn't real, or they're just lucky.
Yeah, it makes sense because I think they're all looking at it through a risk cost, a money cost, and then a money return, which most of us entrepreneurs, we do that as a part of the process, but we're not choosing this venture because we want to make money.
Right.
And that's where I'm like, if they were asking the right questions,
right,
they would be like, why are we doing this? You know, they're looking at like, if it works out well, we make money. If it doesn't work out, we lose money.
And they miss out on the adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
You know, that's the fun.
Yeah.
You know, like you could see it in the eyes.
No, the way they're looking at it, it's going to give you an ulcer.
That's right.
Yeah, you're just
That's right.
drinking Pepto-Bismol, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's all they think about. They're not really enjoying something that entrepreneurs enjoy when they put everything on the line.
Yeah, when you just push all those chips in.
Yeah.
That nobody ever really realizes, you know,
Yeah.
they think we're just taking everything. They don't understand. Every day we're pushing in millions of dollars.
Yeah.
That we may not get it back.
Right.
Everybody else gets paid.
But yeah, that gets me
Yeah.
back to my earlier point about being the guy that takes the hit.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the things that defines an entrepreneur. I've known guys who would never take a hit for their church. You know, they would, in fact, if there was, you know, a shortfall, the last thing that they would suggest being cut is their pay.
Sounds like a consultant.
That's right.
That's a
Now you know.
I don't like consultants.
Yeah, most of the people I know don't.
No, but this would probably be offensive. The two examples of those pastors that you gave, the ones that are employees, the one are not, I draw a line right between those, and one of them to me is a leader.
Yes.
And the other one is not.
Right.
And I don't mean to demean those people that aren't leaders.
Right.
They're just not leaders.
I think that's a good way to put it.
And I think we need to draw that line, because there's instances where we're not drawing the line, and the people that aren't leaders, which is okay that they're not leaders, they're frustrated because maybe they have expectations of being leaders.
Yeah.
Or they think they're supposed to be a leader, and they don't have the traits to be a leader.
Yeah, and one of the challenges I think for entrepreneurial pastors is when their leadership is not.
What do you mean by that?
So let's say you've got an elder, a group of elders in a church who are all employees. They've never done anything risky in their lives. Basically, they've just shown up for work for 40 years, you know, and they kind of just think in well, they live in a cubicle, and so they're mentally in a cubicle. And you're kind of like saying, hey, let's do this.
Yeah.
You know, what are they thinking? Risk.
Yeah.
They're thinking, no, our job is to mitigate risk. We're not going to take any risks around here.
That's actually not their job.
Yes, well, I agree. But they're thinking, we're trying to control you because you are risky.
Yeah.
I've experienced that.
Oh, I'm not.
But I'm in a situation now where I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs in the church I serve now, and you know their risk tolerance is pretty good.
Yeah, the analogy of they're both pastors. It made me think of managers in business when we give people a manager position that they're not a leader.
Yeah,
you know, they may manage. Well, if you can't manage people, you shouldn't be a manager. But it's so often, I think, with managers, and I would say I see this the similarity now with pastors. We're giving them a label, but we're not really understanding the label, or the church isn't understanding it. And this might be why I have problems, or I think I have problems with pastors. And so
you probably have problems with most pastors.
With some, not you. Now that I've met you, we're just going to leave the story of how we met elusive.
Right. But we were in South Dakota.
Yeah.
At what was the place?
Well,
the
we were
motorcycle place?
Sturgis.
We were at Sturgis.
Should I just tell the story now?
No, it's okay. Let's leave them like wondering.
Yeah, we went to Sturgis.
We were at Sturgis.
He was riding on the back of the motorcycle. We'll just leave it at that.
That's right. Right.
No, and so I'm loving this because I'm learning your perspective on entrepreneur, pastor, leadership. It's fascinating to me, but it's also now I'm challenging myself. Where am I lacking as an entrepreneur in my leadership? Because I think there's things that I lack when I start comparing myself to this leadership pastor role. Not that I want to be a pastor. I don't feel called to be pastor, but I'm just doing this. You're talking. I'm doing this exercise in my mind, going, what would I be bad at if I was a pastor? Because I think these are things I possibly could work on to be a better leader as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it this way.
Yeah. Well, I think that you're probably more pastoral than you think. So when you were talking, but just yesterday when we were, or the last show I should say, when we were talking about your story,
Mm-hmm.
you were talking, you spent, you stated something about early on you were like on these houseboats with all these people who basically need to live on houseboats.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of issues and they want to talk.
Most of them were just divorced men that had to go live on their boat, and which sounds
and you're
horrible.
listening to these guys. Well, that's a very pastoral thing you did. You didn't just cut them off.
Sure.
And then when you talked about your employees, I could tell there was fondness.
Oh yeah.
You liked them
100%.
and you wanted them to succeed. That's all very pastoral.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, maybe I have more traits in that I never learned to read well or read books, so I think that might be which I'm okay not being a pastor.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to talk you into it,
But so back to your journey, you're a pastor. You've educated me now on this entrepreneur pastor, and even how Paul was, one of the OG entrepreneur pastors building tents. And
yeah.
what else did you do in your entrepreneurial journey besides pastoring?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a point where I founded a nonprofit, 501c3, and that's very much a kind of entrepreneurial experience. But kind of the way you measure success is different, than say a for-profit business. But you're starting something from scratch.
Pushing on my buttons again. I don't think you should. I'm not. We don't have enough time.
Now.
Okay, I'll agree with you for the sake of letting you keep speaking.
So I'm not like a big proponent of like nonprofit agencies. Just so folks know.
It's okay.
But during all those those years, I always had sort of a thing in the back of my mind. I want to be a landlord.
Okay.
So. And it has a lot to do with my personal family history. But I got an opportunity, when we were in Boston, I got my opportunity to buy a two-family. So we were living, as renters in Cambridge, and we bought a two-family down in Dorchester.
Like a duplex.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
they're over one over the other,
okay.
Not side by side. So you get 2, 3, 4, those tend to be, and those were all built during the Industrial Revolution,
okay.
when people, when extended families would actually like live in all the floors.
Okay.
So, anyway, so we got into this particular two-family, and my financial situation just changed overnight for all sorts of reasons. One of those reasons is I was actually less money out of pocket every month because I was, bringing in rent.
Sure.
But then there were all sorts of things that were just kind of like the hidden benefits of home ownership, and like, in terms of tax and all that kind of stuff. So I learned all about all that kind of stuff. And it was a great time to buy because nobody wanted to live in the city at that time. So this was like 1994 in the height of the crack epidemic.
Okay.
And they were begging people to live in the city. When I tell people that, they're like, no way, man.
Sure.
No, back when I got into it, all the smart people were like moving out.
Okay.
Or they wanted to live in, some Tony like suburb of Boston or whatever.
Sure.
So, people were trying to talk us out of it and that kind of thing, but it worked out great. And then, of course, like Giuliani's policing methods were like, introduced in New York, and people like around the country said, you know what, law and order is a good thing.
Yeah, when you put a police officer on every corner, it's really hard for those pickpocket or the purse thieves to make it that far.
Yeah,
it's a long marathon through Manhattan.
Right.
When there's a police officer on every corner.
And the whole idea of the broken windows policing philosophy, basically, people think that the neighborhood is going to hell, they behave that way.
Sure.
And if they think that the neighborhood is actually safe and like it's valuable, they behave differently.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the problems with left-wing mayors, and they just don't get this at all. So
I agree.
But everything changed about midway through the 90s. And it was because of this. And suddenly, television shows like Friends and, Sex and the City and all these shows get popular. Everybody wants to live in the city just overnight.
Sure.
And then property values go crazy. And that was my, I onboarded at a great time. And I'm the first to admit that I've benefited from forces far beyond my control. And I'm not like super smart, it's just like happened.
Sure.
Right? But that tends to be the way it is all the time. The way I explain it to people is there are a lot of people who didn't benefit from those booms at all. They stayed renters. They bought in after the boom.
Mm-hmm.
They got in too late, that kind of stuff. So economic forces, like even the business that you were in, there's a larger economic kind of gale wind that's blowing, and that is
Sure.
high tech and telecommunications and that kind of thing. But you got to get your sale up.
Yeah.
If your sale's not up, you're not going to benefit. So the reason why I benefit is I got my sale up.
Yeah.
And so I was propelled along by these forces. There are different forces today. So when people ask, how can I get into real estate the way you did? Well, it's just a different world. I'm the first to admit that. But there are other things. And the thing about these other things is no one sees them yet. You have to be a little bit ahead of the game in order to benefit. So this gets me back to the conversation we had a while back about see the money.
Sure.
You got to be able to see the value before everybody else does, because when it's obvious, it's over. It's too late. You got to get in before everybody else knows. So there's a guesswork, there's risk, there's all this kind of stuff. But anyway, concerning my own kind of my own experience, from 94 to 2004, I went from one tenant to 18. I owned property in 3 states. I had people working for me, and I was a full-time pastor.
That's awesome.
So, in fact, I remember one time I had one of the guys who worked for me who actually visited my church on Cape Cod because he didn't actually believe
that you were a pastor.
Pastor. That's right. Because, so there are some people who say, I can't believe you did real estate. There are people in the real estate world who say, I can't believe you were a pastor. Here's a fun one. So I was on a board of a developer in Seattle because they knew I was, have a background in like real estate and stuff like that. And they're all Christians, and they thought it would be kind of cool to have a pastor.
Sure.
On the advisory board. And the guy that was sitting next to me was like a big developer in like South Carolina. And we're looking at like income statements and stuff and balance sheets and we're talking, and he looks at me, he says, "You're a pastor." And he just couldn't believe it.
Sure.
But anyway, it's kind of fun to surprise people that way.
Yeah. I think the mystery is let people have the mystery. But they can hunt you down. They can hunt you down and come find you at church, I guess. This is fascinating. I didn't know what to expect with this conversation, and this might be the best part of my day.
So I was also a home improvement contractor for a little while. So
you still want to do some home improvement, because we got a property in Florida that might need some work on it.
I'm pretty tied up. But kind of concurrent with this is I was leaving my old denomination.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that I needed like a golden parachute when I left. So there were things that were going on in that denomination that I was not on board with, liberalizing trends and things like that, kind of the early woke stuff. And I knew it was coming because I was super connected in that world, and I knew that I was going to be leaving eventually. So for like the second half of that 10-year span, I was making my exit plan.
Okay, what year was this?
So I left that denomination in 2004.
Okay.
So, from the late 90s, like 1999 or something like that, I was like, I'm out.
Yeah.
But you just don't I had 3 kids under the age of 10. My wife's a homeschooling mom, doing that full time. I was like, I can't just, drop everything, but I got to prepare. So I prepared my exit strategy. And when we left, so we were on Cape Cod at that time, when we moved to Connecticut where some of our properties were, and we wanted to be near my wife's folks.
Okay.
So that's
always good.
Yeah.
Family's good.
Yeah. My mother was already gone, and we didn't want my kids near my father. That's a whole other story.
Okay.
So anyway, we went there, and it was great. but I was out of the pastorate for a while. So about 4 or 5 years I was out of the pastorate.
Okay.
And I was like, well, what am I going to do? Well, so my real estate mentor said, why don't you come and sell real estate with me? So, so this is a guy that I've told you about. He's kind of like the big fish in that area. And so what I did is I specialized in commercial real estate, mainly people who were just getting in. So when I looked at the market, I said, okay, one of the things that most realtors are really bad at is investment properties. They're terrible at it. So where everybody wants to be is with the bread and butter single family home, and generally the female agents want to work with other women who are like wishing they were like, I don't know, in some like Good Housekeeping magazine.
Sure.
They're all about that side of the thing, the business. So none of them were interested in that. In that world, maybe 50% of the realtors are women. So that means that when it comes to the commercial real estate stuff, it's mostly men, not exclusively, but mostly men.
Makes sense.
And even those guys, maybe 10% know what's going on with like rental properties.
Man.
So I said, that's where I'm going to focus. That's where I'm going to focus my attention. And in 2 years, I became number one in that market as the real estate guy for, people who were just getting into investing. I actually got the attention of a couple of the national firms, and they tried to recruit me to go sell in New York.
Sure.
At that time, I said, I'm not interested in doing that.
Well, what you're saying is true, or was true, or even is true, like I've never even thought of this, but we're buying residential properties, but they're commercial properties. That's how we're treating them.
Yep.
I've never thought
BlackRock is too.
Yeah. I've never thought of.
It's a whole different market today.
I've never thought of. I'm just thinking now, for those agents out there that might have the skill set that how strange would it be? It seems strange to me that you'd have an agent that would be proposing buildings that he believed were essentially good operating machine, like good investments. I don't think agents do that. They just, you want to sell something, I'll try to sell it for you.
Yeah, and I did some of that. Sometimes people would come to me with something to sell, but I was drumming up my business.
Yeah, if you had the money, I'm guessing you were like, these were good businesses. You would buy them. If
I was, but actually what was happening is I knew the crash was coming, so I was actually trying to get everybody out.
Gotcha.
So I was literally telling people, you need to get out now.
You need to sell.
Yeah, I need to sell now.
Crash is coming. Cook your values. Yeah. Get these things. Yeah.
So here's how I did it. And this is, again, it was just like I didn't like read a book on this. I just kind of figured it out. So I learned that the grand list, which is like the list of all the properties and their owners and their addresses and their phone numbers, is public information.
Okay.
So I would go to the town hall and I'd say, I want the grand list on this CD. And they'd say, oh, fine, it's public information. You just need to give us $10, and it's yours. So I ended up collecting all the grand lists for all of the towns around me, and I could sort them. I'd say, I want to know, all the 2 families, all the 3 families, all the 4 families, all the 5. That's the cutoff. 5 family is when you start getting into, sort of a whole different kind of category. Sure. And the reason is you can buy a 4 family as your own residence.
Okay.
When you get into the 5 families, then it's considered, even if you live in it.
It is commercial.
It's a commercial.
Yeah, it's a different machine.
Yep. 25% down, all that kind of stuff. So I said, okay, I'm gonna focus on this market, and I just send out flyers, basically saying, get out now. That was basically my mess, and I called myself the multifamily man.
I like this.
So I said, this is my segment. And really, if you're in the real estate game, you really need to do that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be like that. Let's say you're just like, you're going to focus on a particular thing, like maybe antiques.
Sure.
It's like, houses that,
You need a specific intentional niche.
Right. And otherwise, you're competing with all those people who want the single family, kind of thing. And now you can do that if you're like been around forever, and you've got like this huge footprint.
I think they're even finding it hard now.
Yeah, probably.
I think the Redfins are hopefully making things better, but who knows?
So that's how I was involved with that. And then after the crash, even I wasn't able to make any money because nobody was buying anything.
Yeah.
In fact, I decided at that point that I'm ready to buy myself, and so I bought a 2-family for 50 cents on the dollar.
Good.
And my boys, Caleb and my other boy Gabe, helped me fix it up. So, what'd you think about those experiences? Anyway,
So he would teach you how to swing a hammer. Is that?
yeah, we would go in and do demolition and basic stuff together. So
I wish I learned how to do that.
well, I learned it because I did it in my first grad program. I was a framer.
Okay.
And worked for actually my wife's uncle, who was like a slave driver. And it was like you could do nothing right. You know, you felt like barking because he treated you like a dog. It was that kind of thing. He was a fun guy. Don't get me completely wrong.
I know a few people from this from this genre.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, but long and short of it is, real estate been very, very good to me. If you remember that baseball.
Yeah.
But anyway, it is, and so at this point, I'm 63 years old. I'm not necessarily interested in buying anything anymore, and I'm just enjoying doing stuff like this.
So now you're back into the pastorate. Did I say that correctly? Pastorate?
Yeah, pastorate. Yeah,
pastorate. And you started back in
2008.
Okay.
So from 2004 to 2008, I got out.
Okay.
So the crash happened. So actually, I mentioned, earlier that I took a pay cut. So we didn't really feel the effect of the crash until 2009. So like I was there for a year, and then the second year I took the pay cut.
Okay. This is insane. It's like a whole world I didn't know existed.
Well, it is a little wild, although I know a lot of guys in the pastorate who've had similar experiences, but they're always kind of outliers and kind of thought of as kind of freaky. So I'm going to have some of them on our show down the road.
I would like that. I think I'm just thinking, the gears have been clicking away. I think I don't know if more people think or understand this.
Yeah.
And I think there could be a message that we should have. I mean, I guess all the pastors aren't going to want to hear this unless they're entrepreneurs. But
right.
No, I think this might make sense to some churches where they have a great preacher and he runs good counseling, but their church doesn't seem to be led. This might be possibly why. Yeah. And I never thought of it this way.
I mean, it's understandable. I mean,
but I value myself in thinking, we were talking about seeing from all the angles, I think from a lot of angles, and this one never was even on my radar. But I've been in church my whole life.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing that many of the pastors you've known were employees.
Yeah.
How they thought about themselves.
I think one wasn't, and then he got kicked out of the church.
I think I know the one you're talking about.
Which, not to say he didn't have any problems. But,
right.
I mean, you show me somebody that doesn't have any problems. I mean, I got enough problems.
Anyway, so that's kind of my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah.
But, I've also been a college professor, which is kind of the thing that I'm known for on the other podcast I do, the Theology Podcast. So I did that for about a decade. But it was never full-time. I was an adjunct faculty member.
Okay.
But they tried to bring me in full-time, and that's a whole different story. And I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, you fought it. The DNA fought it.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, an entrepreneur, I don't think people realize we have these fundamental, I don't know if they're laws, but they're things that now when you know about yourself, like when someone's like, "Oh, you'd be great for a board," I'm like, "I don't do boards."
Yeah,
I don't do.
I'm
boards.
bored by boards.
Yeah, and they're like, "Well, but you could help," and I'm like, "I'm happy to help."
Yeah.
I'm happy to help. Right. I'll help. Your organization needs help. I will help you.
Right.
You don't want me on your board. I will lose my mind. I already know this.
No, I'm with you. Yeah. So when I was teaching, it became pretty cleir over the years that this was not for me. I mean, that wasn't my. I didn't want to make that my future. I'm so glad I didn't, because even the school I taught at doesn't exist anymore. So I'd be out of work.
There you go. It worked out for the better.
Right.
Well, thanks for telling me your story. This was, I think I've already said it, but this is fascinating, and
Well, it's fun to talk about it.
You've given my brain too much to think about while I don't sleep tonight. And I ponder things in the middle of the night. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. Insomnia is a gift.
It is. I cherish it.
Anyway, we should probably wrap up. I'm taking it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for listening to Chris and Chris Talk Business. And we're going to be talking about other people's businesses in shows coming up. But now that you've had a couple of episodes about Chris, and you know a little bit about where we came from, now you'll know why we kind of approach the people that we are going to talk to in the ways that we will in the days ahead. Okay, see you next time. Bye-bye.